So in today's gospel, we find ourselves dropped down right into the middle of a conversation between Jesus and his disciples. Now, I think it would be helpful to know what happened in the first half of this conversation, because Jesus has just been asking the disciples who the people think he is. John the Baptist, Elijah returned, or maybe some other prophet. But then Peter comes to understand who Jesus really is, and he makes his confession of faith. You are the Messiah. It is Peter who comes to realize that Jesus is someone far greater than any of these other figures listed. For the Messiah is the one long awaited for by Israel, the one they've been waiting for really since the death of Moses. Finally, Jesus is here, sent by God to set everything right, to overthrow the forces of evil and wickedness in this world, and establish a new kingdom over all the earth. You see, for Jesus to be the Messiah means that they, the disciples, are now heading directly into a campaign of glorious victory over the powers and principalities of this world. No more tears, no more despair, and they would be right there at Jesus' side for all of it. I mean, this is an incredible amount of honor and prestige. The power at their fingertips must have been downright intoxicating. But Jesus does not give them much time to bask in this revelation. No, instead, Jesus goes right into this explanation that opens our gospel reading today. He tells his disciples that, yes, he is the Messiah, but what they have in mind for the Messiah is not at all what God has in store for them. Rather than leading a conquering army to ultimate victory, they will instead witness their Messiah being brutally executed and will be called on to follow him into their own martyrdoms. Can you imagine a greater disappointment? A bigger letdown than this? The power of God and prophecy and righteousness all at your fingertips, and what does it get you? Humiliation, dishonor, and death. Can we really blame Peter for what he does next? For gently taking his leader aside to privately convince him that he's on the wrong track? You can just about hear him. No, Jesus, you must be mistaken. You're the Messiah, the chosen one. Victory is now at hand. How can you be talking like this? Don't you know I would never let you be killed in such a humiliating way? In truth, the surprising thing here isn't Peter's impassioned rebuke of Jesus, but rather Jesus' reply. In response to Peter's plan to keep Jesus safe, he becomes Satan, the adversary. Notice that Jesus doesn't say, quit acting like Satan, or stop listening to Satan. He says, "Get behind me, Satan." For it turns out that anyone who attempts to separate Christ from the cross is Satan, is an adversary of God's plan. For God the Son has come to be crucified. This is and always was the divine plan. For Peter to try and block Jesus from his crucifixion is for Peter to become an adversary to God. He must be reminded by Jesus to get behind him, to get back to following in his plan. And why is it that the cross is so essential for God's plan? Why must Jesus be crucified of all things? Well, to understand the necessity of the cross, we must first understand the meaning of crucifixion in the ancient world. For the Roman Empire, crucifixion was a political tool used to maintain order, to suppress dissidents, to maintain the peace. It was, of course, a gruesome way to die. But more importantly than that, it was a shameful way to die. Stripped completely naked, beaten, forced to carry the cross through the crowds, and then hoisted up for all to see. This was not just a means of executing rebels and bandits, but a way to so fully humiliate them that any associated with them would be sure to distance themselves out of fear of the shame it would cast on them by association. Crucifixion was the lowest and most humiliating way to die that the Romans, already experts in dealing out death, could think up. The Roman statesman Cicero, he describes it as, quote, "Wretched is the loss of one's good name in the public courts. Wretched, too, a monetary fine exacted from one's property, and wretched is exile. But still, in each calamity there is retained some trace of liberty. Even if death is set before us, we may die in freedom." But the executioner, the veiling of heads, and the very word cross, let them all be far removed from not only the bodies of Roman citizens, but even from their thoughts, their eyes, and their ears. End quote. You see, this is such a shameful way to die that Cicero urges his fellow Roman citizens to not even think about it. It's just not the sort of thing that polite company meditates on, let alone discusses openly. So why is it so important for Jesus to undergo all of this? The reason is because Jesus, in his life and in his death, reveals to us the nature of God. Jesus' death on the cross teaches us about who God is. If you want to know what God looks like, look to him hanging on the cross. Look to the lowest of the low, the shameful and the powerless. What Jesus reveals to us is that all of our human expectations about power and glory are exactly backwards. It is not with conquering armies that Jesus has come to set everything right, but by dying on a cross. And how fortunate we are that this is the way. Because Jesus also reveals to us how we can grow closer to God. And again, it's not by seizing power. It's not by collecting glory for ourselves. But rather, it is by dying. By dying himself, Jesus transforms the one thing that is common to all mortals, that we will die. He transforms it into the very means by which life eternal is granted. After all, not everyone can be a king, but even a king will die. And so in Lent, we are reminded that if we want to grow closer to the God of the cross, then like Peter and the other disciples discovered, we too must get behind Jesus. Follow in his footsteps and take up our own crosses. Lent is a time to be reminded that God has turned the ways of the world upside down. To be reminded that it is in dying to ourselves and our own self-interests that we will find true life. For those who wish to save their life will surely lose it. But those who lose their lives for Christ's sake will be saved. Amen.